Unless you've been living under a rock, you'd know that Foxconn has been everywhere. This Taiwanese company that is known for being Apple's largest contract manufacturer has consistently been making headlines in India for its massive investments and partnerships as it looks to diversify its supply chain operations outside of China.
Taiwanese giant Foxconn has announced it will invest billions of dollars in India to expand its manufacturing presence on the subcontinent.
Vedanta and Foxconn have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Gujarat government to set up the semiconductor manufacturing unit in the state.
As part of its Project Elephant, the Hon High Technology Group's Foxconn has expressed interest in setting up a factory in Bengaluru to produce electronic components.
Foxconn plans to invest $700 million in a new plant in Karnataka and also set up a new manufacturing facility in Telangana.
While these are the good headlines, there have been some really disturbing ones too over the last decade, especially concerning working conditions of the company's close to 500,000 labor force at its sprawling factory in China.
Critics have long pointed out alleged abuse of factory workers by Foxconn, which has made their lives miserable.
An exhausted workforce, people sleeping on their breaks, others falling asleep as they work.
One worker, whose role was wiping special polish onto the LCD screens, said she handled around 1,700 iPhones a day.
And a growing number of these workers are either killing themselves or trying to. And Foxconn doesn't know why.
Protests at the main Foxconn factory in China are intensifying. The unverified footage doing the rounds on social media is alarming. People wielding sticks, smashing surveillance cameras and windows at the massive campus of the Apple supplier.
So we at TMB wanted to give you all the details we could find about this elusive company that was established in Taiwan in 1974 and has very swiftly and very quietly become the world's largest electronics manufacturer. What is Foxconn's model in China? What have been the issues with their operations in China? Should the China model be replicated in India? Why is everyone going gaga over Foxconn? What do these investments really mean for India? What are Foxconn's current operations in India? How does all of this fit into India's electronics manufacturing ambitions? What are some stumbling blocks that we really need to address to use the China Plus One strategy to our advantage? But most importantly, what is the human cost of our digital future? So many questions and so little time. So let's get straight to it. We have with us Dr. Jenny Chan, Dr. Satya Gupta, and Arjun Malhotra to give us all the details. It's Thursday, April 13th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to Foxconn in India, Neighbour's Pride, No One's Envy, on the morning brief from the Economic Times. Before we get to the guests, let's set the scene, shall we? For that, we need to travel over 7,000 kilometers to Zhangzhou, the capital of the Hunan province in China, and also home to the famous Shaolin Temple, which is considered the cradle of the Chinese martial arts. But amidst all of this rich history and culture is the sprawling Zhangzhou plant of Foxconn, which is spread over 1.4 million square meters. That's the size of 7 of the largest football stadiums in the world. Oh, and before I forget, it boasts everything from dormitories to restaurants, basketball courts, and a football pitch for its 2 to 4 lakh employees who produce an astounding 5 lakh iPhones in a day. Yes, 5 lakh iPhones in 24 hours. Also, this is just one of Foxconn's many factories in China. But It's important because it's the largest such facility. We spoke to Dr. Jenny Chan, who co-authored a book, Dying for an iPhone, which exposes the truths of working conditions in the ultra-secretive Foxconn facilities in China. Jenny was part of a team that went undercover to find out the story behind the suicides, excessive overtime, hostility, and violence on Foxconn's factory floor in China.
There are more than 40 mega factories all over China, and in one of the largest ones, they indeed got nearly 500,000 in terms of their workforce. And even after relocation, they got more than 300,000 during the peak time when the orders was really rushed and workers have to work day and night to produce, to just keep up with the high production target. The daily hours will be up to 12 hours, including 4 hours that are the compulsory overtime. I still remember when I was doing undercover research, when I simply borrow the staff card and then get into the dormitory and talk to the young female workers, they will indeed share with me they have menstrual pain. They had really much difficulties during some days in a month, and it is due to the high work stress.
And that's not all.
These are not just the laborers, the hard-working people, but they are also the migrants who do not enjoy citizenship rights in China. They do not have equal benefits or rights as their urban counterparts. And because of the high living cost in the city, most of them indeed could only so-called left behind their children at home. So these are the social or human dimension that we really want to share with our readers.
But just so you know, this is Foxconn's model in a sense. They rely heavily on migrant and contract workers.
There are indeed some specific pattern that we could find within Foxconn. Foxconn really depends on vertical integration. It is a model that they want to have a tight control over its own global supply chains. That means they themselves will produce the parts and components in-house. It also means workers will come only during the peak seasons, and when they are not needed, they will be laid off. So these are the migrants who are highly, I would say, transient or temporary. No one would really think of a stable career or job tenure inside Foxconn. So all these are the flexible labor regime that is quite despotic and coercive. Foxconn is really large scale, and in terms of their management methods, that is indeed very top down, even though there are trade unions inside Foxconn. But the weakness is that the trade union never really stand by the side of the workers, so there is no genuine ally on the shop floor. Workers have to take matters into their own hands, including going on strike or protest.
Now comes the next obvious question. If these workers are being made to work so much, surely they're well paid. Sadly, it doesn't seem like it.
Even until 2010, so we are talking really like more than 12 or 13 years ago, Foxconn, despite the largest private firm inside China, but they are really paying at the legal minimum. That means in 2010 is 900 Chinese yuan. And many of these young workers or those who are already married, they really put in overtime work so that they can make nearly more than half of their normal monthly income. That means about 1,400 in total during those days. And this wage is so low that all of them basically are living inside the factory dormitory.
I get that Jenny's numbers were from a while ago, but it's believed that these numbers are not much better even now. Add to that the stringent COVID policies that China put in place, and you have a recipe for disaster. It's no wonder then that only last year, in November, Foxconn found itself firefighting. And it was their own workers who started the fire, so to speak. Videos went viral showing hundreds of workers breaking surveillance equipment, staging demonstrations, demanding pay, and even getting into brawls with police people. While we've highlighted the working conditions, there's an equally important aspect of living conditions. For starters, almost all of these workers are housed in dormitories on the premises. One of the things that some workers had a problem with in the protests that I just spoke to you about. Basically, some workers complained that they were being forced to share rooms with those who were tested positive for COVID. Here's Jenny telling us about the living conditions.
Living inside the dormitory means that you have a bed space only, no matter upper bunk or lower bunk bed. Like 12 people in the room, well, sometimes maybe 10, sometimes could be up to 24 people in a shared living conditions. So you could imagine.
And how big are these dorms?
You can say about 10 square meters for about 8 or 10 people in total. Mm-hmm. They actually do not have kitchen. They also do not necessarily have shower facilities, but the new dormitories, they do have a little bit more space. And I want to still highlight the fact that no matter there's a bigger room or a tiny room, the main idea is that you really do not have your privacy or your personal space. You can only make a curtain to separate your small little space from the others. Mm-hmm. And many of these people, they have different shifts, maybe a day shift and night shift, and many of them are coming from over China.
Listening to Jenny reminded me of my own visit to one of Foxconn's hostels in Chennai last year. Foxconn was forced to revamp their facilities following a food poisoning incident, which made Apple put their plant on probation. We've done a complete episode on this, and you should definitely give it a listen if you haven't already. But to give you a quick recap, once the incident took place, Foxconn scurried to get their factory up and running. I went to one of the hostels that were being redone and saw that the walls were being painted, bunk beds were being put, cupboards, safes, better bathrooms, water coolers, entertainment rooms, and a host of other facilities were being introduced to make the young girls feel at home. From my conversations with a few girls at the time, I was told that they went to the factory in the company bus and came back to the hostel after work and didn't really have much of a life outside of that. Also because the factory is located on the outskirts of Chennai. When I visited, there was really nothing much there besides one police station, one salon, and one restaurant. And while there were a lot of similarities that I could find between what Jenny said and what I had seen here, there was one thing that struck me about what she said about polishing workers who work on iPads. And as Foxconn looks to go beyond manufacturing just iPhones in India and is exploring the idea of beginning to manufacture more of their products here, this is something important to remember.
In our direct observation, that is indeed based in another huge iPad factory. They are producing only one product for one customer, and that is iPad for Apple. It was exactly during the transitional period when they got the first generation iPad in 2010, they got massive land, they got human resources. And here in the iPad polishing workshop, the workers are using their human hands to polish the iPads. So when you see the 4 round corners that are so smooth in those days, that are really a combination of using human labor and machines to make it.
Jenny was shocked by what else she found during her undercover investigation.
We already can tell everyone is inhaling the aluminum dust into their lungs for 10 or 12 hours a day. Why so? Yeah, they do wear a mask and they also have a pair of gloves, but the materials are so thin that these small particles or the aluminum dust can be inhaled into the body. And these metal would be harmful to the human being.
So now that all of this has come to light, are the labor laws being strengthened in China?
So there are pretty good labor law on the book within China. And I must admit, some of the laws that are regulating the working hours and wages or basic social insurance benefits, that are even much better than some of these regulations in Hong Kong. However, in terms of implementation, it's indeed completely another different world. Are there any significant improvements in terms of laws and regulations? I have big question mark in that. There have been, for sure, more public attention to young student interns, their rights to education and their rights to labor protection, because even nowadays, Foxconn rely on vocational or technical schools to be the main supply line of their workers. And then they also recruit from the labor markets, and therefore labor law is supposed to be their institutional protection. But these protective mechanisms are quite weak. For Foxconn, they indeed have very, very good connection with the local officials. And precisely, we really find it difficult to have very strong evidence in terms of bureaucratic corruption. But sure, we can tell from the fact that workers have been putting in excessive overtime work, and that is compulsory. And all these goals are all against the labor law and the student internship management regulations.
Here's a small nugget of information that backs what Jenny just said about Foxconn being an extremely powerful and connected entity in China. The company's founder and former boss, Terry Gou, last week sought the presidential nomination for Taiwan's main opposition party for a second time. But what does all of this really mean for India? What should be our takeaway? And is Jenny concerned about Foxconn's sharp focus on India as its second home?
Yes, I'm very concerned. I do understand for Indian government and many other local states, the officials are attracting Foxconn and other investors, build new factories, recruit likewise migrants or young girls and women and men to work. I'm not an expert in this area, but that is already very worrying to me that there seems to be more flexibility in terms of how you can extend the working hours to just meet the production goal. So what can we still guarantee in terms of protecting workers' organization rights, their freedom of assembly or occupational safety and health? So these are really the big issues that will come to my mind. And just the same business model in China, it is not only based on the efficiency within Foxconn, it is as much as about the local state collusion.
Detailed queries sent to Foxconn remained unanswered. Now, there are two key factors fueling Foxconn's growth in India. One is Apple's plans to diversify its supply chain operations and in turn pushing its top contract manufacturers like Foxconn to rapidly scale in other geographies. The second is India's own ambitions to be Atmanirbhar in semiconductors, the chip that powers most things electronic in the world. Apart from, of course, the incredibly large domestic market that India provides for electronics. Only last month, Foxconn assured the governments of Karnataka and Telangana that it will work with them to expand its electronic manufacturing base in the country. In February, Foxconn chairman Young Liu flew down to meet the chief ministers of both states and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, among a slew of others. This, by the way, was his second visit to India in less than a year. ET has reported that Foxconn is expected to start construction of a mobile phone manufacturing unit near Bangalore International Airport as early as next month. The 300-acre plot will likely generate 1 lakh direct and indirect jobs over the next 10 years. Keep in mind, though, that Karnataka is a poll-bound state. Now, if you're already wondering about Foxconn's operations in India, the company has a huge unit at Sri Perumbudur in Tamil Nadu where it makes iPhones. There's no doubt that India is a super bright spot for Foxconn, and that was evident when soon after its global launch, iPhone 14 started being manufactured in India. All in, the company plans to invest $500 million into this market. So yes, Foxconn does see India as a future hub. As per reports, Apple and Foxconn, among others, managed to convince the Karnataka government to tweak labor laws and include aspects like 12-hour work schedules and night shifts for women. Remember, women constitute a large portion of the electronics manufacturing workforce. Will that really help, or should we be concerned? We put members of the Electronic Products Innovation Consortium, or EPIC Foundation, to tell us. We were joined by the foundation's co-chair and founder of HCL, Arjun Malhotra, and CEO of the foundation and president of the VLSI Society, Dr. Satya Gupta, to tell us what Foxconn's India bets really mean for the larger electronics manufacturing ecosystem in India. I started with asking Arjun about why he was excited about Foxconn's aggressive India expansion.
What Foxconn gets is high volume production. I think it's important, it's necessary, and it's good to see it coming to India. What it will do is automatically create a lot of ancillary industries around what they're doing. I mean, you can look at infrastructure, housing, skilling, employment. And of course, for the country, it comes on the supply chain for a lot of people in the world. And, that's really important because we haven't really been a big part of the global supply chain in too many things. Plus, from an Indian point of view, once we get volume production in India, the component manufacturers will get motivated to invest and set up component manufacturing in India because, A, we've got a large domestic market. So I'm quite excited to see something like that happen. It'll probably get India back on the hardware map. Now the domestic market is large. And, if we don't manufacture components in India, in some short period of time, 3 years, 5 years, the import bill for electronic components will exceed the import bill for oil. So I think it's critical for India to look at it very aggressively. We have to make electronic components in India. It'll also get us to design products that are relevant for India. I mean, there are lots of ifs and buts. Let's say if tomorrow someone decides to set up a fab in India, where am I going to get the people to run the fab? I don't have any of that experience. So there are lots of loose ends that need to be tied up. But, we are very good at doing that.
And is India really ready for Foxconn's plans?
I'm not worried about the physical infrastructure, let's put it like the land and the buildings and stuff. Yeah, we are very good at that. And, we make A-class buildings. We can do pretty much anything. I'm more worried about power. We need clean power. It doesn't need to fluctuate too much. The frequency needs to be right.
Right.
I'm more worried about pure water that you need for cleaning and stuff. Things have improved, but if you want to get into chip manufacturing, improvement has to be much, much more than what it is right now.
Sure.
I'm sure we can do it, but someone has to pay attention to it, a lot more attention than is being paid today to some of these things.
Coming to what we started this episode with, the welfare of workers and their working conditions. There's been talk about Foxconn lobbying for tweaks to the labor laws, and I asked Satya if this was a red flag for him, but it turns out he feels some changes were necessary to the laws.
Indian labor laws, to the fault, were very labor friendly. But now, because of the needs of such products, right, we are making it balanced, where both the interest of the manufacturer and the neighbors are taken into account. So obviously India is very different country than China, and it's very difficult to flout these labor laws where it will hurt the basic necessities of the labor force and their welfare and everything. One of the things which might require a careful understanding and tweaking is the working condition for the female workers.
Right.
It has been proven that electronics manufacturing, women, basically workers, can play a major role. So wherever there are unnecessary restrictive conditions, if they can be tweaked without compromising the safety and the good conditions for these women to provide the conducive environment, I think that is one area where we can basically leverage this huge resource of the women worker in a productive, but at the same time in a very labor friendly way and in a safe environment and so on and so forth.
And Arjun felt it was unfair to put the blame for workers' welfare and safety squarely on Foxconn.
It's not just their responsibility. Yes, they should be much more sensitive to people and not work them like slave labor, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also part of our regulators. We need to make sure that we work with them to ensure that they don't exploit the labor, but we work with them to make sure that we do things that make sure that the labor is productive. Ultimately, you're trying to do this to get higher productivity. Now, making people work 12 hours a day doesn't improve productivity. So we have laws already in place that say that
Correct.
48 hours, and I see no reason why anything should be changed there. Now, in China, you can probably get away with a lot of stuff because it's a totalitarian, it's an authoritarian state. It's different. In India, people can go to court, they can ask you lots of questions. So if they're coming here, they understand what it is. They'll obviously try and change a few things that they feel would be advantageous to them. And it's up to us to decide whether it's acceptable to us or not as a country.
Barring the food poisoning incident that took place at their Chennai plant in 2021, Foxconn has had a fairly smooth run in India. And now it seems like a red carpet and bouquets for them. Foxconn's tie-up with Vedanta for chip manufacturing has been the talk of the town, and we couldn't possibly let our guests go without discussing the company's foray into this space. I asked Satya if he felt Foxconn's limited prior experience in semiconductor manufacturing would be a setback in this JV.
Couple of things here. There are a lot of basically misconception about this JV between Vedanta and Foxconn, right? Foxconn has done some small level semiconductor manufacturing, so we cannot say they have not done it at all. Secondly, they are in this JV because they know what is the business side of the semiconductor manufacturing. Like, for example, if I'm producing 40,000 wafers per month in any of this plant, which is typically what the capacity is needed, right? Now, somebody has to consume and sell those wafers, right? Now, Foxconn is so deep into the whole supply chain of buying and basically utilizing the chips coming out of foundry. They know how to handle the business side of a fab. Second is they know how to basically operationalize big projects from an infrastructure point of view, from the ecosystem point of view. So they have done small amount of semiconductor manufacturing. They are one of the biggest entity who is engaged in buying and basically utilizing the chips. So I think somebody like Foxconn is a big asset for any semiconductor project.
Arjun also told me that companies like Foxconn have access to the best human resource in the world, both in ideation and implementation, which is why diversifying isn't always a challenge for them. While all this seems positive and rosy, Satya warned that the geopolitics could play spoilsport.
The whole electronics and semiconductor ecosystem globally is going through a lot of geopolitical issues. Realignment of the geopolitical forces, right? China basically controlling something happening in Taiwan, right? I think those geopolitical things are certainly can alter the landscape. But as far as Indian conditions go, we have basically very positive environment today. And I don't see any specific thing which can basically halt the growth of electronic products and electronics manufacturing. Manufacturing foundation has been laid, infrastructure is good, labor availability is good. So I think these are all positive indicators. But geopolitical risk is where I will put my input that we have to just see how they evolve, right?
And amidst all of this massive opportunity is Foxconn.
As a company, Foxconn is important. There are lots of other manufacturers like Foxconn who could come in. It's important because it gives people a milestone that they can look at, which gives them the comfort that, hey, if this company has come in, others can come.
But here's the million-dollar question, quite literally. Can India truly be an answer for Apple's China Plus One strategy? Satya says we need to think beyond manufacturing.
Apple's dependence on China is not just because of manufacturing, but China contributes very significantly towards the design of iPhone also. Manufacturing is not a sticky business because somebody can go wherever the best basically things are available. But once you anchor the manufacturing around design, then you create more sustainable and sticky business. I think that design dependency is more crucial for Apple to basically be in China and be big in China than just pure manufacturing. So India has a lot of engineering talent, but we are not doing the product design using those talents. I think that's the next pit stop we have to build if we have to create a sustainable electronics business, including manufacturing and the product.
$215.3 billion. That was Foxconn's revenue in 2022. So it's a huge company in every sense of the word. Hence, it comes as no surprise that every state is looking to woo the Taiwanese giant to make in their state. Foxconn is also important because of its affiliation with Apple. And who doesn't want a made-in-India cheaper iPhone, right? It's safe to say that Foxconn and Apple are some of the most powerful players in this ecosystem. And the Indian government is putting a lot of store by their success in India, as everyone hopes that other companies will follow suit and gain confidence from Foxconn's stint in India. And while all of this is great, we shouldn't forget the people who will be fueling this growth. And the changes already made by the government to labor laws at the behest of Foxconn and its friends may be concerning too, as Jenny said. We're not saying this should set off alarm bells. We're merely saying that we should remain aware of Foxconn's history in places like China and make sure that while we celebrate India being an electronics manufacturing hub and preferred destination for manufacturing, we don't let our people be exploited or suffer in poor working and living conditions. Thank you, Jenny, Arjun, and Satya. It's Thursday, April 13th. I'm your host, Rekhi, and you've been listening to Foxconn in India. Neighbour's pride, no one's envy. On the morning brief from the Economic Times. A shout out to the team that helped put this episode together. Producer Vinay Joshi, sound designer Rajas Nayak, executive producers Anupriya Nair, Anirban Chaudhary, and Arijit Parman. Do like and share the episode and follow us on your favorite podcast platform to make sure you don't miss an episode. The Morning Brief is streaming on Amazon Prime Music and JioSaavn, apart from Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And of course, ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Do tune in to ET Play, our latest platform for all audio content. Thank you for listening in and have a great day. All clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners, credits mentioned in the description.